welcome back to another episode of Raising Tech. I am very excited for this episode, and I think it's really on the forefront of something huge that's coming within our industry. I am joined by Josh Satch, the founder and CEO of Meela, and David Finkelstein, the Chief Information Officer at RiverSpring Living. I got a chance to connect with Josh recently, and they're building some really cool stuff, so I'm excited to jump into it. And with David being one of the communities that's using it, thought it might be great to hear from him as well. So, Josh, let's start with you. What inspired the idea behind Meela, and what gap were you hoping to fill in the aging and senior living space?
Yeah, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the podcast, Matt. And it was a pleasure to see you back in Arizona. It comes from a deeply personal space. I was fortunate enough to meet my now wife in high school. And unfortunately, while we were in high school, her dad, who was an attorney in New York City, ended up getting cancer. And the cancer on his neck, unfortunately, ended up spreading, became treatment resistant, developed Parkinson's. And we watched him go through the aging process and ourselves, the family, loved ones, go through the aging process. And then we also, as we were going from in-home care to community setting to palliative care where he passed, experienced, from a third person's perspective, what some of the tensions organizations that support the aging process go through. I've been in the tech sector basically my entire professional career. I worked at companies like Microsoft. I worked on the Windows product, as well as Lyft, where I helped spin up a division of business called Lyft Media. When AI got to a place where it was powerful enough to have an emotionally resonant conversation, decided to quit my job and start building Meela. And at the core of it, uh, you know, comes from this thesis that there are a lot of people that require care, and that could be emotional support, it could be, help fixing their toilet, it could be help, getting to their doctor's appointment. And the number of people that are able to deliver that care around the clock is kind of shrinking, if not staying the same. So you have number of people able to deliver care in the numerator, and the number of people requiring care in the denominator, and the denominator is exploding, and you have the numerator staying roughly the same. So as time goes on, the care gap is going to widen, and this is a phenomenon that is well documented in the industry. Without the augmentation of technology, either aging is going to get very expensive, or quality of life is going to deteriorate. And our job here at Meela is to make sure that, you know, both the emotional components of aging are tended to, as well as some of the tactical boots on the ground components are tended to as well. And we partner with senior living organizations to make life easier with voice AI.
Cool. Yeah, and I know we'll jump into what that actually means here in a little bit, Josh. And I appreciate you sharing that background with us. And kudos to you for being with your high school sweetheart. So, it's beautiful. And David, and I'll say, and I was telling David before we hit record, I feel like since I've been in the industry for 10 years, a lot of innovation, technology, everyone has put David on a pedestal. So no pressure here, David, but really excited to have you on today. But I'm wondering from your side, like what challenges or gaps in the workforce were you seeing at River Spring that made you open to exploring something like Meela?
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate you having us on this podcast and looking forward to talking with your viewers and listeners. So let me rewind a little bit to some of my experiences here. So I joined RiverSpring Living back in 2012, about 14 years ago, as the Chief Information Officer. Had a lot of cleaning up to do from just IT infrastructure and modernizing some of the systems. But the real change or the turning point happened around 2021, quite in the middle of COVID. We were taking care of a gentleman that was referred to us through a local hospital system, and he went through our various levels of care through the organization. And he eventually passed while he was in our nursing home in the middle of COVID, not of COVID, but of other complications from his illnesses. His wife and his family were just so, I guess, thankful that we were able to provide them the care, the comfort, the reassurance during the last year of his life that they wanted to show their appreciation. So they decided to make a donation to the organization, a sizable donation, to be only used for technology projects. So this was really a time in my career where it's always fighting for budget, always fighting for ideas, fighting for just keep the lights on, to being like a kid in a candy store where now I have a pot of money that I have to now safeguard and keep as if it was my own, because that's the kind of way we took this donation. And we really established a team and went through a digital transformation journey through the organization. We brought in some of the board members, we hired a clinical project manager, and we went to the marketplace to look for technology solutions that would really solve a triple aim for us. We wanted to make sure that the resident experience for the residents that stay under our roof ends up with a better experience one way or another. We wanted to have a staff experience to be enhanced. We want to give them the tools, the technologies, the services and systems that make their job easier. And at the end of the day, we wanted to have things that are financially affordable and can fit within the budget. Even though the initial funding of this was through the grant, we wanted to make sure things were sustainable. So we went through some very interesting projects. We ended up putting some technologies in our rehabilitation gym, some robots, some virtual reality headsets, some advanced technologies to help patients get better during their care here. And then we were introduced through a mutual friend, Josh, and his team about this idea of Meela. He came into our boardroom, met with a team of about 15, 20 of us, senior staff members, pitched his concept of what Meela was and how it was going to work, did a quick demonstration of how the product worked and was. And it was very lifelike. It was very interactive. It just wasn't robotic as many of the other voice-enabled AI chatbots that we've seen. So we left that meeting, we talked internally, and we brought him back and said, well, we have an opportunity for you. We'd like to be a part of a pilot, because we do everything with pilots first before we roll it out to make sure it works. But we want something even better than that. We're 107 years old. RiverSpring is known as a progressive organization. We want to do an exclusive pilot. So we want you to shut down your entire sales chain for anyone else that you're talking to. And we want you to do a pilot here at RiverSpring to prove and see how the product can work and how it can be effective in the organization. After some thinking, a few days, came back to us and says, yeah, we can make that work. So we went to really the attorneys to develop a license agreement that made sense from a HIPAA and privacy perspective, making sure that we can partner with Josh and his team to roll this system out across our organization. We have skilled nursing, we have independent living, we have assisted living, and we have a home care agency, all that had the opportunity to be able to benefit from this product. We decided to do a small pilot. So we got together our care managers, we got together our social workers, we got together our activities people, and between our team and Josh's team, we went to community meetings, we went to family council meetings, we went to resident council meetings, we went to activity groups to figure out what the interest is for the residents to participate in using something like Meela. We have probably 600 or 700 residents on this campus. Not everyone is technically or clinically or cognitively capable of even making a conversation on a telephone, so that limited our pool. But we did come out with about 50 residents across the different levels of care that wanted to participate in this pilot. Eventually, I think we ended up with 28 that saw through the entire pilot. And we did, through our medical director and our IRB, we did a true clinical trial with before and after. So we got various publicly acknowledged scales of depression, of isolation, of anxiety, and we did before and after. And after I think a 6 or 8 week project, we chose and we showed that there was a significantly significant clinical reduction in anxiety and in loneliness and in depression. And actually that article and that research study was just recently published in one of the medical journals. I think it's coming out in March.
Wow, I love that. And David, thank you for walking us through all that. And it's beautiful that, through that donation and that grant, you guys are able to do all this technology. And it's so cool to see, like you talk about RiverSpring being progressive. I think you're one of the few, if not the only organization helping older adults that has technology highlighted in your main div on your website. So it's so cool that you guys are able to do all that. And it's really awesome to hear about the pilot, and good on you for getting an exclusive pilot. I feel like those are rare. So, good for you to be the first to try out Meela. And Josh, I'm wondering from your perspective, because we've talked a little bit about Meela and like, can you just describe what it actually does? Like, what makes it a companion AI and how does that fit into residents' daily lives?
Yeah, so it's a great question. The way I like to think about Mila, so I'll just take a step back and explain what it is for the listeners that haven't heard of Mila before, is it's like a phone buddy that is accessible to all residents in 14 languages, and is just a phone call away. So Mila, you can talk to Mila over a landline, a rotary dial, a cell phone, a flip phone, and you chat with her like you would any other, any other phone buddy or friend. And she remembers things from past conversations and personalizes the experience towards you. So if you love talking about the Yankees, for example, she'll talk to you about the Yankees. And like I said, we experienced this need for this product to exist as Emily and I, my wife and I, were going through this process with her dad. We realized that even in the best communities and even in the best staffed communities and with the best family members, even if you call for an hour a day, there are still 23 hours in the day that kind of go untouched. So, and that's for the best family members. Now, unfortunately, isolation is rampant and very prevalent within the senior demographic. So, um, basically, we designed this chat buddy for these older adults. We're very forward with the fact that this is not a person, so we don't try and obfuscate that. Um, and we tell the residents, hey, look, there are certain things that you're not able to talk to Meela about for safety reasons. So Meela doesn't give medical advice, financial advice, legal advice, and she doesn't get sexual. Um, and you know, the way it fits into people's lives is based on what they need. So there will be certain people that need somebody to talk to on tough days, right? When they're having trouble with their roommate, for example. And they'll talk to Mila on that day, and that conversation can range between 2 minutes and 25 minutes. Some people, like we were talking about earlier, want to just talk about the Yankees, and there's nobody around them that can talk about the Yankees for 60 minutes 3 times a week, and that's Mila for them. There are other people that, you know, want to just reminisce and talk about the good old days when they used to, go fishing or whatever it might be. And they do that on a monthly cadence. So Mila kind of fits different voids in people's lives and helps people live more full lives. The objective with Mila is that she's also a force for good. So she'll encourage human interaction, she'll encourage human connection and exercise and being healthy so that people are able to live their best lives as encouraged by Mila. I hope that answered the question.
Yeah, that answered it. It sounds like I need Meala in my own life to remind me to exercise and eat right and all that fun stuff. But I think it's really cool to see how that can overall impact. And I think of my dad who avidly hates the Yankees. So if he ever talks to Meala, it'd be like every anti-Yankee conversation I think that's possible. But I digress. And David, I know you kind of talked about like what some of those early meetings looked like and bring it to the residents, but I'm wondering like what that early implementation looked like. Like, how were the residents responding to Mila when first introduced? I can sometimes understand AI can be scary, but I'm just wondering like what some of those first conversations looked and maybe sounded like.
I think that, at the beginning of every single call, because I get a call from Meela a few times a week and I chat with her about lots of different things. Every call starts with, I'm your AI companion. So it's kind of reminding them that this is not a real person that they're talking to. And, I know a lot of the residents that live in the facility here personally. I go up and help serve breakfast once a week and meet them in the hallway and have good conversations with them. And a lot of times they'll come to me and say, well, yeah, all my friends and neighbors taking the Yankee exhibit don't want to hear me talk about the Yankees anymore, but Meela keeps on doing that. The best example I had, and it's actually timely because I guess it's almost exactly a year ago. There was a story that I heard that a bunch of residents got together in an activity room to watch the Super Bowl. And at whatever the appointed time, one of the residents had their appointed call, so her phone rang and it was Meela, and she had to excuse herself from watching the Super Bowl because it was more important for her at that time to take a call with Meela and chat with her on what went on with the day. I mean, there was some residents are in bed bound that are really this is their only interaction other than the nurse that helps them with their medications and the food service workers help them with their meals. This is the only interaction they have with people because they're bed bound, and you can see the cheerfulness. I mean, Josh has a couple of video interviews with some of the people that have used the system, and it's really uplifting to see that if nothing else, it's a 20-minute or half-hour bright light in their day to help them cope with their situation, with their medical condition, and give them something to look forward to the next day or the day after. So I think it's been something that fits. It's not everybody. We had a number of people that tried it for a couple weeks and thought it was not fun or not interesting. Some people says, well, I have my friends and family. I don't need to talk with a robot. Fine, then it's not for you. But there is a niche and a relatively large niche of people that this is very therapeutic and helpful across to get them through the day.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. And when, I think back to my grandmother when she was still alive, and I would make it a point to at least call her weekly. And, that hour a week made her life. But I know a lot of people weren't calling her. So to have something like Meela that could still engage with her, I think, makes me feel good that they're able to give that to other people. And the next question is for you, David, because I think a lot of people outside of the industry are not working in these communities, assume older adults are resistant to tech. And maybe not so much Mila directly, but you guys are obviously embracing technology, using technology. I'm wondering, David, like what's been your experience with the adoption curve with technology with residents, especially, since you started there, I think you said like 14 years ago. Like, well, how has that changed over the years?
Well, you have, you can't lump all the seniors into one bucket. There are a lot of individuals. You have plenty of people that walk around with their flip phones. You got plenty of people that walk around with their iPads, and they can navigate that pretty easily. And we get plenty of phone calls down in IT about someone who can't figure out how to work the remote control to change the channel. I've seen other AI companion systems that relied on devices like an Alexa or some other piece of hardware. And one of the things that got us very interested in working with Josh and Meela is that all you need is a telephone. And one of the things that we've learned of taking care of residents over time is that even as people decline cognitively in their different stages of their life, they may be some forms of dementia or some Alzheimer's. The reflex of answering a ringing phone is one of the last things for them to lose. So even when someone in a declining state can still be through that reflex, even if they pick up the phone and they only say 2 or 3 words and Mila talks for the rest of the time, it's therapeutic for them. And so we didn't there are plenty of residents out of the 500-600 that we have on our campus that we self-screened that wouldn't work well with Mila, and we just didn't introduce them and didn't hear about it. But there are others that are with peer pressure. Some resident will talk to another resident. Well, I'm doing Meela and it's great. All right, let me try it. Let me figure out how to do it. So I think the residents have their own lives. This is where they live. This is their houses. Sometimes we feel like we're invading their privacy because we're going into their house because this is where they live. But the whole idea is to really help people meet people where they are and be the best tools and supports for them to live the best life that they can.
Yeah, it's a great point. And, it makes me think when you mentioned the peer pressure, I think that's the one thing that remains constant throughout our lives. I see it with my 4-year-old daughter and the peer pressure she gets from her schoolmates. I see it in these communities, of course. So I think it's the one thing that remains constant throughout the course of life. But Josh, I am wondering because sometimes, of course, and to David's point, you can't put all older adults into one bucket. but some think they are like tech phobic. But like, how did you design Meela to overcome that tech phobia?
Great question. We lead with trust and transparency. Um, so something that's really important for older adults, and I think people generally, especially when becoming acquainted with a new technology, is laying down the rules of engagement, like laying down the lay of the land, and then also introducing it to them in a form factor, like David was saying, they're accustomed to, and that something that's not new that they need to learn. So even though we have like, the most cutting edge LLMs and really sophisticated infrastructure that powers conversations with Mila, um, the end user behind the phone call is it's kind of obfuscated from them how much sophistication is happening behind the phone. It's only a phone call. So we tried to keep it as accessible for there. I think there's, I don't know if it's at RiverSpring, but we have a user that's 103 and visually impaired, but he can still answer a phone and he's fully cognitively intact. And he's able to have great conversation with Mila, and it's a great outlet for him. Um, so thinking about all of the what seems to be edge cases of the senior demographic, and try to be inclusive of all of them. Like, what is the most common denominator? And like I said, a lot of that intuition was built from our experience of watching Elliot age.
Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. And I love how you guys are doing it like through phone calls. I think too many times technology companies try and come in and like just force everybody to use a very specific app, and then there's barriers to using the app. So I love that you guys are making a phone call something that's native to how people are communicating already today. Um, and David, I'm wondering from your point of view, because obviously, there's gaps in the workforce, if not today, going to be taking place here in the next couple of years, few years, as we see some of these aging demographics shift. And I'm wondering, like, what do you think about that line between like human care and AI assistance? And I'm wondering, like, how you're thinking through that today, and maybe how you're thinking about it into the future here.
Sure. So that's one of the good things about working with Josh and his team as a startup. Instead of having to have an established product that's been around for 20 years and just say, all right, your good ideas are great, but you're not changing the product. So him and his team have been very responsive in looking how we can expand Meela to use it a little bit outside of the initial use case of a companion phone call. So for example, she will listen for certain keywords or certain ideas. So if someone is complaining that their knee hurts for 2 or 3 days in a row, while Meela will not provide medical advice or guidance, she can send an alert to our medical director saying, Mrs. Smith is having trouble with her knee. Why don't you go visit her and see how that's going? So we're kind of helping the clinicians around. Same thing with food service. The person's complaining that the food's cold or there's not enough salt in it all the time. Let's get a note to the food service director to see them. Or they're complaining it's too hot in their room. Get them over to engineering. So we're trying to pick up comments that maybe don't rise to the amount of a complaint, but comments that will help the resident in their stay by picking them out of that conversation. I know that Josh and his team are working with other ways of putting questions into the conversation interstitially so that if we need to do kind of a survey, but not really a survey, we can kind of ask questions that we want the answers to and be able to come back with that feedback through the system without having to go put a survey system together or get out paper or call people separately. So we're trying to really expand the scope of how Meela can be used in addition to its purpose as a voice companion. And that's really where we see the future going and how it can help our workforce and being much more efficient.
100%. One of the cool things that we're doing is identifying trends across residents. So if David, Matt, and Josh all say that the fish is way overcooked at the community, the dining director gets a trend or the culinary team gets a trend from Meela on a weekly basis saying, hey, we noticed that something is up with the fish. The way we're kind of thinking about Meela moving forward is we want residents and staff to think about her like a workforce multiplier or the 11th employee on a 10-person team. So you're able to ask her specific questions about, what time the mail gets delivered at the community. You can ask her to fill out a work order, whether you have WorksHub or Tells, and Meela is able to actually fill out those work orders, and then the resident can call back and say, "Hey, what's going on with my toilet? When is it going to get fixed?" The same way you would a real physical human being that works at the community. So we bucket it into two groups. It's the tactical stuff that Mila needs to do that, any staff member at a community would do, like, asking questions about how people are doing, getting their toilets fixed and tickets up and, ordering them Ubers. And then there is also the soft and mushy, which is, hey, I want to talk about the Yankees for an hour, and staff members just don't have time to do that every single day. And Mila is able to do both. So it's a tenth or 100th of the cost of a staff member, and you're able to deliver it to every single resident 24/7. So that's the quality of care we're trying to deliver to all seniors. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. It's like, in addition to helping with that social isolation at the resident level, like that instant feedback loop to the staff, which is just, I think, so smart. And is a way to do that because, you hear too many communities doing their yearly review and then they get that information, but this allows it in real time, day to day, week to week, how often you guys are looking at it. And I have to call out Go Orioles, or my dad would be very mad if he listens to this episode. Too many Yankees examples, but I'll back off. And next question for you, David. Can you share any moments that surprise you, whether positively or otherwise, in seeing Meela interact in your community?
I think it's the kind of the buzz around the residents that when you go and see them outside of the normal context, just walking down the hall. And I heard you had something to do with bringing Meela here, or when the pilot was ending towards the end of last year. And are we gonna be losing Meela? Are we gonna extend this or expand this? Because we don't want to lose it. So having the stickiness or the want of to continue the application was definitely it was interesting to see, and it was great to see the residents that and you talk to them in other contexts to really be the big pioneers and the cheerleaders for this. One of the things that we worked together and weren't as successful with, and I know that Josh is working on solving that, is we wanted to roll this out to our various home care patients. And the issue with home care is trying to get the patient and the caregiver and the Meela team member at the same place and the same time to explain to the patient the Meela product and enroll them into the system and and get them through their first phone call or two. And the logistics of that was very difficult. But Josh and his team has worked very hard to be able to do kind of self-service enrollment. So we can give the caregiver or a family member and people interested in the home can do this at their own time, at their own pace, whenever they want to do it without having to have a caregiver or a Meela representative there. And that has helped solve that one big problem that we had in the front where we couldn't enroll enough people in our home care to make a big difference. And we're hoping that this will help us in getting people in our community programs more of the ability to use it.
Yeah, I think it's really smart to think about that, David. I think, it's not a surprise to anybody in this industry if you look at the percentages of the people trying to age in place or aging at home. So looking for tools like Meela to kind of help extend that RiverSpring arm and that impact and that support, I think it's really smart. And it makes a lot of sense. And to your point earlier, it's great when you can work with startups. They can take that feedback. They're nimble. They can work through it. I definitely have worked at startups and I've worked at bigger companies, and it's a night and day difference when it comes to product development or really prioritizing that client and customer experience. So that's awesome.
That was one of our biggest concerns up front, even though we were very interested in the technology and the product and the team and everything like that. We kind of take a very tentative pilot approach for any new companies that we work with because we don't want to end up with a dead-end product or a product that we have to rip it out and away. So I know that not too long after we did this, Josh secured funding to be able to make his enterprise sustainable, and that helped us and really feel much more comfortable in continuing the rollout and the expansion of Meela within the organization, knowing that they're not around for a week or they're around for the long haul and to be able to be partners forever with us.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If I had a dollar for every time I came across a startup in this industry that's nowhere to be seen today, I probably could retire right now. But that's another story for another day. And then, Josh, looking ahead, like how do you see companion AI evolving in the next few years, and what might that mean for senior living at scale?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. Um, with every new technology wave, I think if we zoom back all the way to the start of human computer interaction, back in, let's say, the 50s or 60s, where you just had Pong, right? You had a couple lines on a screen and then like a ping pong ball in between. And that was really the first time you had human computer interaction. And then, 10 years later or 20 years later, we had Pac-Man. And then 10 years later, you had computers playing chess. And then another 10 years later, you had Sims, for example. And there started to become this like emotional component. And then that was a little bit weird. And then some time passed, and then it became kind of normalized. We're going to see that same trend happen with this technology. So we're still in the early adoption phase, and it's still getting demystified, so to speak. I think people are going to come around to the fact that, listen, this is a fundamental, problem that if we don't have technology to augment, we won't be able to solve. And as long as you partner with organizations that prioritize safety and have the right safeguards in place in their platforms, there is a good way to leverage this technology that is good for the residents, that is good for the organizations, and good for the families. Um, there will probably be some bad actors that kind of muddy the waters. And that's why I think it's really important to look at the founder and, the organization's charter and say, like, look under the hood and say, hey, why are you doing this? Like, what are the true incentives behind this? Everybody that we hire on our team here, we make sure has, really strong mission conviction. So I think people will, in summary, lighten up on the concept. And, like David was saying, at the end of the day, there is going to be a percentage in every senior living community of people that could benefit from this product. The decision makers that sit behind the seat, whether or not to try a technology like this, I would encourage them to just keep an open mind when it comes to this, because they're ultimately like the gatekeeper as to whether or not the residents can get this medicine, so to speak, in air quotes. Yeah, it's very low risk, and it's if you don't want to continue talking to Meela, you just say, "Hey, Meela, stop calling me," and she'll stop. And like David was saying, we have a early medical journal published academic research study that suggests decreases in anxiety and depression at 95 and 99% confidence measured with clinical tools. So you have something that's very low risk and affordable, and potentially very high reward. So I think people will come around to that.
I think it's inevitable, right? When I think about the AI companion and what that can look like, and I think especially for helping our older adults and like having someone there that's 24/7 that's available to speak. I mean, we've all seen the data around social isolation, and I feel like technology is one of those things that can really help. And some of these AI companions that are, personalized and able to hold conversations is the wave of the future. And my last question, we'll end it with you here, David. What would you say to other CIOs or senior living operators who are curious but maybe hesitant about bringing AI into aging services?
All right, so I think that, if you take our approach that we've gone through for the last 3 or 4 years, whether or not we had the funding through this donor is one thing, but come up with an organization goal and a project saying, I'm going to try small pilots with the aim of resident satisfaction, staff satisfaction, and budget efficiencies. And when you look at that, I mean, it's almost a no-brainer to pick something that's low cost of entry. It needs a phone call and a small monthly subscription fee. It has a huge upside to potential of reducing depression, isolation, anxiety, possibly even moving to reduction in medication use, better movement behavior, which then gets expanded between residents and staff and just the environment of care within the organization. And as long as you approach this with a small pilot, you're not going to give this to every single resident and walk away and hope that it works. Thoughtfully roll it out, see how it works. I don't see there's any downside of not doing that. I have a number of colleagues. I have a call tomorrow with another colleague in Washington, D.C. area that's asking about Meela for this. I've talked with other colleagues. I've spoken at a number of different conferences on how successful this has been. And it's all, my job to help Josh and his team is get the word out. Try it. Make sure it works. Make sure that you have the opportunity of giving your residents a better life to live.
I love it. Well, David, I feel like we got to give you a microphone to drop after that, but just want to thank you both for coming on today and walking us through this. I think the collaboration between provider and technology partner is just so vital, and it sounds like you guys are attacking it the right way. So thank you, gentlemen.
You can find us online at raisingtechpodcast.com, where you can see all of our episodes and contact us to provide feedback or submit an episode idea. We are on social media everywhere at Raising Tech Podcast. If you enjoy Raising Tech, please leave us a review and share with a friend. Music is an original production by Tim Riesig, one of our very own Parasol Alliance employees. As always, thank you for listening.